Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to my channel. My name is Lauren, if you're new to me, and I'm healing my chronic fatigue and adrenal fatigue by healing old emotional wounds. Old emotional wounds that came from my early life and before. And I'm sharing with you all the things that I've learned on this journey and I'm continuing to learn as I do this myself. So if you have been following me and you've heard other videos that I've done, you may have heard some videos that I've done about shame. Shame has been a big theme that I've been working on healing in the last few months. But it's been a theme throughout the last 2 years of the things that I am working to heal. But I've been working in the last few months on shame in a very direct way. An interesting sequence of events happened very recently, and it has led me to a new layer, which is so exciting. It's always exciting when you get to a new layer. It's also sort of destabilizing and jarring, and it really takes all of your focus. When this new layer comes, you feel all this emotion or you get worsening of symptoms, depending on where you are in your journey. So I'm going to point now where most of the things that come up are now mostly pure emotions, not the physical symptoms that come from an emotion trying to come up and that energy is blocked by your old patterns. And so the more time, the longer you spend working on rewiring that pattern and diverting around that pattern and getting to the actual emotion, the more you do that over this journey, the easier it will be to find the emotion that's behind the symptom that's coming up, because the emotion will be more accessible, because it's almost like your body is learning that it's safe for the emotion to come up. So it was a really interesting sequence of events, and I won't go into the whole sequence because that's not going to happen. The same sequence is not going to happen to you. But these sort of serendipitous things that happen in our lives, which happen more and more as we heal, because we're becoming more and more aligned with ourselves, and as a result, we're becoming more and more aligned with the universe. And so we start to get more serendipitous things happen in our lives, which is really cool. And so those kinds of things can help you on this journey to help bring new things up whenever you are ready, whenever the universe or your soul or however it works decides that you're ready for another layer or another aspect of the wound that you're working on or something. So I'll say quickly that I've been learning recently about Chinese astrology and Chinese face reading, and that was one of the pieces that helped me get to this new layer. So I was reading about so I have very strong wood personality. The Chinese astrology uses, well, there are several types, but one type uses the five elements, and one of those elements is wood. And I have very strong, prominent wood energy, and that is shown on my face with very prominent, strong eyebrows, indented temples, and a defined jaw. And those are all wood features, and it's so interesting that our personality can actually be influenced and is influenced by the features on our face, and actually vice versa, which is so interesting. So I have a very strong wood personality, a very strong wood face, and I don't have very strong other elements as a result. I have a face reading book, and I could just focus on the wood section for me, and then, other elements for other people and understanding other people. But it's a new esoteric field that I'm just finding is so fun, and it's a new way of figuring out more aspects of my personality, my tendencies. And this is really, I'm using esoteric modalities a lot to help me, and I've talked about astrology. It's helped me tremendously, because if you're like me and you as a child ended up suppressing your personalities to such an extent that you haven't been able to see what your true innate personality and tendencies and everything is, because you can't see past the thing that you've created, and you created it because you had to, or you decided that it was the best avenue for you when you were a child to get the most love and safety. And that personality that got you the most love and safety may have been the complete opposite of what your natural tendencies were. And I think the farther away we are from our natural tendencies and personality, the more likely it is that we're going to get sick, or maybe the sicker we become in our lives. So if you've suppressed your personality, that could be a huge piece to this illness, and uncovering that personality could be a big key to healing this illness. And because when they're so suppressed, and your personality is suppressed from all these unconscious tendencies, they're all unconscious at this point, then until you start doing the work of making them conscious, so it's like, well, how do I figure out who I am? All I know is who I created and who I have been for the first decades of my life. So who am I? So I've used esoteric modalities, astrology, numerology, and all kinds of aspects of astrology, and now some Chinese face reading, and I'm finding it fascinating. So again, so back to the wood features. Okay, wood represents springtime, drive. It's a doer. You get things done. You're always going towards a goal. You've got lots of energy. You've got vitality. And, as I read, this used to happen to me when I would read about Aries. While I read of the wood, I would just slowly get more and more sad, because I would see all the things, the ways that I am not in alignment with my core essence. Even still, and I'm getting there, but and that's what to focus on. To focus on the progress of going towards that, and not of all the things that are lacking. That's hard for us to do, especially if you have a shame wound, to focus on the negative and how you are less than, or, that's the shame wound. But it's also important to feel the sadness that you need to feel about the things that maybe you feel like you missed out in life because you had suppressed those things. But it's important to always land in the place of gratitude. Gratitude, thank you to my inner child for creating the personality that I needed to survive in my family and with my upbringing. Thank you. Thank you. Because the truth is, your childhood could have been so much more difficult, a lot less pleasant, if you hadn't done that. And I don't know how your childhood was, but it could have been much tougher if you hadn't developed those defensive skills, maybe those interpersonal skills, and those other ways of being in the world that maybe were not natural, but you created them. And now you have got all these skills on top of your innate skills that now you're going to discover, which is pretty cool. Now you have extra skills. So I was reading about my wood qualities, and what was most fascinating, there was one line in there. So wood people can their sort of default, when they get out of balance, they can revert to anger and irritation and frustration. That is true for me. But it didn't used to be until I had this illness, and it started just coming out. Like it was almost like my innate personality that was so out of balance because I hadn't been in alignment with it at all, just was like leaking out all the time. And I had so much anger coming out before I even knew I had this illness. And I didn't know what the heck was going on because I was so out of balance. But now I'm very much in balance most of the time, but I'm still out. But I still have more to heal, and that happens in these little layers, these little chunks. There are lots of things that are still getting in the way of me being a doer all the time. I still have that energy, but I get blocked. I get blocked a lot still. So a wood personality person tends to default to anger when they are stressed or just out of balance at all. But the line that I read that really hit hard, and this led me to this next layer underneath the shame, is that it said that wood people can get into really big trouble when, for whatever reason, they learn to internalize their rage. And if they're out of balance and they have a lot of rage and all of it is internalized, it can cause major problems for people. it hit hard, and all of a sudden I could see so clearly that that was me. That is me. So much rage turned inward. And yet, it has not felt like rage to me. Over the next week, I had some interactions with people that led me to finally understand that when I feel rage, my physicality changes to be limp and heavy. Those are the symptoms. I get those symptoms. I get limp, and my limbs, my body feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. I can hardly move it. I'm limp, I'm heavy, I'm weak. It seems so illogical that rage would do that, because we think of rage as the very outward energy and coming out. But if you have a lot of shame about that rage, or if it was dangerous to let that rage out at a person when you were a child. So this originates from rage at a caregiver from a child for some reason. And if it's not safe to send that rage at the person directly, and usually it's not when it's a caregiver, sending rage at a caregiver can be really dangerous emotionally and or physically. For me, it was emotional danger, because this parent was never going to hurt me physically, and this parent was never going to leave me physically. It was emotional, and it was emotional danger. And those of us who are very sensitive people, empaths, just if you identify as sensitive, that emotional, I want to use the word warfare, that can happen between parents and children can be even more destructive to the child when the child is very sensitive. So when the rage can't be sent at the source of the pain, as children, we turn it inward. And this is so destructive. But it was a lifeline for us when we were children. And so we had to do it. So thank you. Again, thank you to my inner child. Thank you to my inner child for protecting me in this way. And I can see so clearly now why I had to do that. Why it was not safe to send anger towards this person. But like a lot of these old emotions, these emotional patterns from our childhood that were ways of protecting us when we were children, are now harming our body because they were toxic in some way. They saved us from a worse situation as a child, or a difficult situation or painful situation as a child, but they are in essence toxic. And toxicity over time creates illness. So this new layer is internalized rage. Internalized rage. Now, underneath every emotion is pain. The core of every emotion is pain. The emotion is always the response to pain. But you still, at least my experiences, even if you go directly to the pain and work on healing the pain, you can't just skip over the emotions. You still have to go back. You still have to go through and heal each emotion and see, feel, accept, and find the gift in every emotional wound that is trapped in your body. And so you just can't skip to the core pain. I mean, you can, but eventually you're going to have to go back and do all the emotional repercussions of that pain. You still have to go back and all the emotional repercussions of the emotional repercussions. Like, I mean, as I say in a lot of the beginnings of these videos, there's a lot of emotional toxicity that comes from living in a life with these buried core wounds. So you live a life, for example, you live a life where you're carrying a ton of internalized rage, or you're living a life with a lot of shame, core shame, then all the things that happen in your life so many things are going to trigger that, and cause more wounding, cause more pain and traumas. So when you have a trauma from your childhood, what happens is sort of normal events that might, or difficult events in life that wouldn't be traumatic to somebody who didn't have early life trauma, is traumatic for you. The example that comes to mind is giving birth. Giving birth does not always need to be an emotionally traumatic event. However, if you have a situation, the birthing situation that you are in, whether it's at a hospital or wherever, or whoever, like whatever partner you're with, or whoever's there, you know, if that birth situation triggers an old childhood wound, an old childhood trauma, you feel trapped just like you did back then, and there's no escape, then giving birth could be another traumatic event for you. This is more common than we realize. I mean, the numbers actually I've heard could be staggering. The number of women who have trauma during their birth because birth is this tunnel that you can't get out of. It's one of the pieces of the formula of trauma. If it's layered on top of it is extreme negative emotional states. Now, not many women are able to keep very positive emotional states and have supportive people around them and aren't triggered in this way when they're giving birth, but it can happen very frequently, especially in hospital settings, just because it's not, I don't consider it a very nurturing environment in general. You might disagree, but it can happen very easily that negative emotional states of other people can influence us so greatly when we're about to give birth too. And so these negative energies, and then if you feel trapped in a negative energy, and you are trapped in that situation of giving birth, in that tunnel you've got to go through, but if you put on top of it this negative emotional state, then that can be another trauma for you that you need to heal. And that's just one example of how just challenging things in our adult life can end up being traumatic to somebody who has unhealed traumas from their childhood. And it depends on the trauma from the childhood. It depends on the situation and the dynamics that are going on for you in your adult life. But it's just an example. So we can if we have unhealed emotional trauma from our childhood, we are more prone to having more trauma, like picking up more trauma in our lives. And then we have more to heal. So this can sort of snowball, that it can create a lot of emotional toxicity when you live a life with these old emotional wounds. So what am I doing with this anger? What am I doing with this anger? You know, this has been an interesting new wound, because it's one that, and to be honest, I don't know if this is a positive or a negative thing, but I have not actually felt the emotion of rage, even as it has come up. I almost feel more sadness, compassion, yes, a sadness for my inner child and myself, just myself, for doing that to myself. And I know that I needed to. It was the right thing for my inner child to do, my child self to do. It was what was necessary for me to have the childhood that I did. I still need to feel that sadness and that betrayal of self, even though I needed to, and I have compassion for it, and I'm not, I'm not bitter, but that's because I've done so much self-compassion work and self-forgiveness and learning self-trust. And at this point, I feel like I have very strong trust and compassion and love for myself, and it feels deep. I feel a deep connection with myself at this point. And so to realize that I have tons of internalized rage, what I have felt called to do is just sit in the energy. And so it comes up throughout my day, and I think about it, and I hold this compassionate space for it. I have had several waves of sadness and grief about it, And I wanted to just sit in that too. And I didn't used to be able to do that because, and you might find this, it's very difficult to sit in emotions that you've done everything in your power since you were a little girl to not feel those sensations, because when you were a child, they were too big and scary and horrible and painful. Now as an adult, we have the ability to feel those and not have terrible repercussions, but we still have those patterns. And even though those emotions are not too big for us and not too scary for us, they feel too big and too scary for us because that's the pattern that we've been living with our whole life. And it's been closed in this door and just pushed just far enough away that I don't have to feel it 100%. Still feel it a little bit because you can't escape it, all of it. And so it like leaks up in you. And so it's just like this perpetual leaking, dropping, dripping, dropping in your body. And you can never escape it until you open the door and you look at it and you feel it and you accept it and you love it and you find the gift in it. Find how can you have gratitude for that thing. Because you can have all these feelings at the same time or in close sequence with each other. What you want to try to avoid as much as you can are judgments and criticisms. You know, the last thing you want to be doing is shaming the shame, shaming the anger, shaming whatever, shaming or judging whatever emotion is coming up. That is the opposite energy of what you want. And I realize that's very difficult when you have a profound shame wound. But over time, the more you practice holding compassionate and loving space for your emotions and your little child self and just your adult self too, you'll get better and better at this, at keeping the shame, keeping the judgment at bay, and holding that loving space. And to be honest, I mean, even though I'm a little confused by it, because usually when I found a new layer, I have to feel that emotion really viscerally. But this rage one is interesting because I'm just sitting with it. I'm not feeling anger come out of me. I'm not feeling rage. I have had some thoughts about angry things that I would say to the person about the things that I didn't get that I needed. And I have had dreams where I do have rage, where I am enraged at the person and I am throwing it at the person. Maybe that's how my psyche's dealing with it, or at least in the beginning. Maybe this is just the intro to feeling that rage in full in my body. I don't know. I'll let you know. I'll let you know how it goes, because at this point, I'm just feeling called to hold that energy, hold that space, really hold a lot of compassion for myself and my child self. And I've been using the Ho'oponopono prayer for my inner child, which is, I love you. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. And thank you. So you're saying to your inner child that I love you. I always love you. I will love you no matter what. Please forgive me. And I'm sorry to your inner child for the sort of betrayal of turning against yourself, and just any of the ways that we've betrayed ourselves over our lifetime, and how judgments, criticisms, just poor treatment, but unconsciously we just treated our inner child poorly because we felt all these shames, we had all these emotions that we didn't know what to do with and didn't know how to handle. And we ended up harming our relationship with our inner child. And so apologizing and say, please forgive me for that. And then thanking our inner child, again, for the ways that she or he protected us by building the defenses that he or she did, that did protect us, that that created a better childhood than we would have had if we were able to be our natural self that was not going to go over well in our home environment. So saying this prayer over and over again, I've been using it a lot over the months, but I've just been using it more frequently with this situation because it really feels, and with the shame wound, it's just, those are really harmful dynamics with my inner child, and I'm working on repairing my relationship with my inner child. I hope this is helpful for you. If you have internalized rage, I feel you, I'm with you, and I think a lot of us do. I don't know enough about Chinese astrology yet, but it sounds like maybe wood personality people tend to have more tendency towards rage than other emotions. Some other of the elements have tendencies towards grief or worry and fear. Yeah, I don't know, just see if this resonates with you. I mean, I'm guessing this would apply to any emotion, that any way that we've turned in at ourselves. And shame is one of those. Has a lot of judgment towards self and belittling of self, believing that we are less than. So I'm going to keep you guys updated with how this goes, because again, I don't know if this is this enough to just really sit with that energy? Am I feeling it enough? The funny thing is, it feels like it's leaving, at least in part. It feels like it's moving through me in this very healthy way, which is a very new experience for me. It feels like the energy is leaving me easier than other times this has happened. And I know part of this is probably the fact that the energy on the earth is increasing. The speed of the energy on the earth is increasing. And so actually, good news for all of us is that it is so much easier to heal than it was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. It's getting easier and easier to heal because things are moving faster out of us. So when we access something and see it and feel it, we can heal things in days or weeks as opposed to months or years, which is what it used to take. So that's pretty amazing. And maybe that's probably part of what's happening. Every emotion, every new layer is different. It's really cool, actually. It makes it an adventure. It makes it very interesting. I hope this was helpful. If you like this video and it resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you would like more of this content, and share the video online if you want. If you know anybody suffering with fatigue illnesses, or for anybody who's working on emotional release and detox, and I know more and more of us are starting to work on that on the planet because of this increasing speed of energy on the earth. But yeah, subscribe to my channel. I'd love to see you back here. And I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day. And I will see you on the next video. Take care.